Good morning, good afternoon everyone, and welcome to episode 10 of this series on how to make a Web3D infinite runner game. In this episode, we're going to add background music and contextual sounds to our game to increase the immersion. Are you ready? Then let's dive in. Last time, we worked on our game over logic. We saw what to do when the player hits an obstacle and reaches 0 health points. And we even implemented a little replay system to let them directly start a new game session. Today, we're going to dive into something completely different but crucial to immersion: sounds and music. So, when you're faced with multimedia content, like a movie or a video game, sounds are actually about as important as images. Over the years, video games have improved in their rendition of sounds. So from the 8-bit musics we had in the 70s to the grandiose soundtracks that we have now on big titles, we've certainly come a long way. As technology advanced, we've been able to include sounds that were more and more realistic, and even some spatialization effects, in particular thanks to binaural recordings. Here, we'll see how to add 2 types of sounds to our game: the background music and some contextual sounds. Background music participates in giving your game a unique identity. It's about finding the right ambience to hook the players and have them feel a certain way. It creates an atmosphere, and it should convey meaning, just as much as the 3D models or the game mechanics. Contextual sounds, on the other hand, are usually short noises or sound effects that happen at very specific points in the game to give feedback to the player on a particular action. In strategy games, it can be the fact that units utter some response when you select them, or just in any fighting game. Think of how important the punch sound is to actually feel like you're hitting something. In our case, Hyperspeed is a simple video game about spaceships with a retro arcade vibe. So for the music, I decided to go for something with basic repetitive patterns and synths and bass-like sounds. If you want to use this soundtrack in your own version of Hyperspeed, you can get this music for free in the description of the video. For the contextual sounds, we're going to have 2 types of sound effects. We're going to have the hit sound, so the crash when we hit an obstacle, and the collect sound when we grab a bonus. Except that rather than having just one collect sound, I want to actually have different ones depending on the price of the bonus. So just like with the color, we're gonna say that low price blue bonuses produce a low pitch note, whereas high price red bonuses produce a high pitch note when you grab them. And once again, the MP3 file is available in the description of the video. But the trick is that, as you can see, there is only one MP3 file for all the sound effects. And that's because, as we'll see very soon, we'll actually take small chunks of this file and then only play part of the file when we collect a bonus. This is a nice way of reducing the amount of resources needed, so the amount of resource files that we need, and also the initial load time. Because rather than opening and loading lots of little files, you open and load just one somewhat larger file, although it's honestly just 10 seconds long, all at once. So it reduces this initial overhead. Okay, so let's assume that you have your audio resources now. You either downloaded them from my links or created your own, and so you now have 2 files. So you have one file for the background music. For me, it's named music.mp3, and another file with all the sound effects glued together, one after the other. So that's sounds.mp3. I put both those files in an assets folder at the root of my project. And now to load, prepare, and play our sounds, we're going to rely on a nice little JavaScript library that's called Howler. So Howler is a JS audio library for web pages that makes it really easy to play one or more sounds at the same time with autoplay, looping, streaming, fade-ins, fade-outs, and even spatial audio with pans. We won't go as far as doing spatialized audio here, but be sure to check out the docs if you want to know more. Just like with the 3.js that we installed in the first episode of this series, you can get a minified version of Howler from a CDN. You can then copy it to your project in the vendors folder and then reference it in the index.html head block. Let's also create a new JavaScript file that's dedicated to handling the audio. So I'll call it audiomanager.js and import it in the index.html file. It won't be very long, so we could put it with the rest, but it's always good practice to separate your code base into logical chunks, even when they're pretty short. And so in this script, we're going to have just a single function that is named setupAudio. And in our main.js file, so in the window.onload routine that's executed when you load the page, we'll just add a little line at the very top that calls this method. Okay, now time to go back to our audio manager and actually make some noise. So something really nice with Howler is that it allows you to stack several audio sources on top of each other very easily, just by creating a new whole object. So it makes it really straightforward to first add some music and then work on your sound effects and just build the thing gradually like this, which is really cool. So first, let's focus on our music, so the background music. What I want to do is load my music.mp3 file from the assets folder, then have the music start automatically when the page is loaded, and make it loop indefinitely. All of this can actually be done by passing some options to the whole constructor. So I'm going to create a new whole object and say that the source is the path to my music.mp3 file and that I want to enable both autoplay and looping. Be careful though, because the path that you give in the src parameter, if it's relative, it will take the index.html directory as root, because that's the page that you're loading where you import your scripts in. So you have to put the proper relative path with this reference for it to point to your assets folder. And then I'll just use the play method of this object to actually have it produce sound. So now if I save and reload my page, you'll instantly hear that there is some music that plays in the background. So that's really cool. A little improvement that we can have is to make the music fade in slightly rather than starting directly at maximum volume like this, because it's a bit harsh. So to have this little volume slide, all I need is to get the reference ID from my call to play. This is something that is automatically returned by the whole object when you call its play method. And then I can use the fade function on my music audio source and pass in the initial volume, the final volume, the transition time in milliseconds, and the play ID. And so here I'm basically saying that I will go from complete silence, so a volume of 0, to the full volume, so a volume of 1, over the course of 2000 milliseconds, that's 2 seconds. And I want to do it on this particular play object. And so now if I reload, you can hear that there is a little ramp up of the volume at the very beginning, and that makes it really smoother to the ear. Okay, and now that we have the background music, let's take care of the sound effects. So as I said before, for the sounds, we'll need to cut down our sounds.mp3 file into several chunks. So in this file, for example, if you took the one from my links, you will have 9 sounds. You will have 8 synth notes for bonus collection, going from one C note to the one that's 1 octave higher. And then you have an additional zap sound for when you collide with an obstacle. Each sound lasts 1 second. So basically, I'll want to chop down this track into 9 pieces of 1 second each. Here I can use a really sweet feature of Howler that allows us to assign specific subclips of a sound to a user-defined key. So what I want is to define an object with all of my sounds that I call sounds. Then I'm gonna go and add the different subclips inside it. So first I'm gonna do a loop from 0 to 7 included to get the bonus collection sounds and assign them to the keys bonus-0, bonus-1, bonus-2, and so on up till bonus-7. To select the chunk of the track that we want, we simply use an array that contains first the start timestamp and second the duration of the subclip, both in milliseconds. For example, here, the first sound starts at timestamp 0 and lasts 1000 milliseconds. Then the second sound starts at timestamp 1000 and also lasts 1000 milliseconds, etc. So basically, I can write this as I times 1000, comma 1000 in my loop. And so this will give me 8 chunks of sound that each last a second and that start at second 0, second 1, second 2, and so on. Finally, we can take the crash sound on its own. It's at the end of the track. I'll assign it to the crash key in my object, and I'll use the array 8000, 1000. Now it's time to create a second audio source by making another Howl object, and once again setting its path to our resource file. I'll also use the volume parameter to dim these effects a little. So I'll put them at half the volume, and then I'll pass in my chunks in the sprite key. The term sprite here is similar to what you see in game dev with sprite sheets. So you might know about these images that are a large ensemble of smaller pictures that are somewhat related and that are then split up into individual pieces. This is used a lot for 2D animation, for example, because it allows you to group all the animation frames of your character on a single image and then iterate through these frames one by one, but still gathering them in a single data block, namely your image. And so we're doing the same thing here. We have a single block of data, that's our sounds.mp3 file, and we chop it down into multiple individual pieces that can be used either in isolation or as part of a group. With all that said, this time we're not going to play our audio source directly, because rather we want to have our game play the proper subclip whenever we collect a bonus or we hit an obstacle. To do this, we'll actually expose our sound audio source as a global variable at the top of this script. And then, going back to our game.js file, in the check collisions function, we will try and access this variable. So if it exists, then we'll play the sound matching the action, or else we will just ignore the sound system altogether and stick with the current logic. This way we don't enforce the existence of the sound system and we better decouple the two systems, but we can still take advantage of the sound system if it's there. For the obstacles, it's quite straightforward. If we do have a sound audio source, then we just play its crashed sound sprite by passing in the name of the sprite that we want to play. But now for the bonus collection, it's a little bit more complex. Remember that we cut down the beginning of our file into 8 pieces with the bonus 0 to bonus 7 IDs, and that our bonus prices range from 5 to 20. So what we want to do is simply remap the 5 to 20 range to the 0 to 7 range, and this will give us the key of the sound sprite to play. This remapping is done via this basic math formula. And so now we have the index, so we can get the associated bonus collection sound and play it when we grab the object. If you save your files and reload the game, you will see that now there is music in the background, just as before, and whenever you hit an object, a little contextual sound will play in addition to the music. So if it's an obstacle, you will get the zap sound, and if it's a bonus, you will get a synth note, which pitch varies depending on the price of the bonus. Blue and purple bonuses have rather low-pitched sounds, whereas pink and red ones have higher-pitched ones. Alright, so today we've seen how to use the Howler.js library to load, prepare and play sound files, either as a continuous looping background music or as short contextual sounds. We also saw how to split a single file into multiple subclips using sound sprites, and we made sure to make the coupling between our game mechanics and the audio manager as loose as possible to avoid tight dependencies. And actually, at this point in the tutorial, we have all the core features of the game, so we can say that we've finished coding up Hyperspeed. There are, however, various improvements that we can still discuss, like adding some camera shakes when we hit an object, showing a little pop-up when we collect a bonus, or having fog in the distance. We could also have a debug console to have more info on our game as developers, or add transitions to our UI panels. So to tackle those various questions and start off your own game customization, there will be a few additional bonus episodes in this series. Next time, for example, I'll talk about the camera shake, the bonus pop-up and the fog. So I hope that you'll stick around to watch those bonus episodes, but if you'd rather end your journey there, I'm really glad you followed me through all this adventure, and I hope you had fun learning how to program this 3D web infinite runner game. As always, keep an eye out for new videos about tech and coding, and take care.